Okay, so we're going to get started. Good morning, everybody. I am Azogu-Sepe. Hello to everyone online. We're going to start the welcome address by me introducing my husband, Dr. Fabrizio Zepe. He is also the owner of the Serengeti Park. He's going to share a few remarks with you, and then I will continue on with my version of the welcome address. So, welcome, Fabrizio.
Yes, a very warm jumbo and welcome from my side. Yes, the title of this year is very captivating, very interesting, because it has the goal to stimulate maybe zoological gardens and animal parks to really try to find out why they're really doing it, what's in there for them. Is it mostly for the people? Is it 100% only for the animal conservation, for the animal welfare? Is it really, really well defined? Because at least 7 years ago, that's what at least I did here for myself. Also because we have an attached amusement park, which helps us to maintain this level of management also of the animal side. Let's say that in Serengeti Park, the amusement side with all the rides and the shows, which is like a classical amusement park, is a little bit for a state-held zoo, the town, where when there's like 1 million missing or 500,000 missing, it gets shot in from the town or from sponsors. Our sponsor and our town are the visitors that come maybe a little more and with a higher price thanks to the amusement area. So it was a little bit confusing as a mission statement because I was saying, do I do it to end extinction here? Do I do it for the people mostly for the animals? And it was very interesting to have these workshops with coaches that helped us really define clearly why we are doing this. And once what's in there really for me also as an owner or as a zoological garden director, then there's almost like a huge boost in front and towards success. And the milestones were to really go in and analyze why are we doing this for children, again, only for the animal and the conservation and the welfare of the animal. And at the beginning, there was a little bit of confusion, and then slowly, thanks also to the coaches, we came to a clear definition on why we're doing this. And at least in our case, we are doing it 100% absolutely first for the human beings, to awake awareness in the human being that by caring and saving animals, animal welfare, biodiversity, it is a way of loving ourselves and rescuing ourselves. So to have the animal awareness and understand animals and understand why you're loving animals, because people just love animals just because the dog, when you come in the evening, goes like this with the tail. But, you know, the animal world is huge and very, very complex. Every different species has its own huge complexity, and it has to be brought together into the biodiversity complexity. And so the message was at the end, and our mission statement is clearly, completely focused on the human being. Also because unfortunately, or fortunately, at least for us, we are also the dominant species on the planet. So we decided that our main focus as an animal park and zoological garden is to reach the souls and the hearts of the human beings, mostly children, and show them that there can be places like animal parks and zoological gardens where human beings, nature, and animal can live in harmony, and that these kinds of futures are also possible to recreate. So yeah, these were my considerations, and my interest also given off to you to start the conference. I'm very proud of the work of the whole team, my wife, and all the biologists that put in immense work to prepare the conference already since at least 6 months. It's a huge endeavor. You don't see it, but I get to see it at home and here. And I wish you a huge success, and let's wear awareness like every year. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So he's heading out now. He has another meeting. But thanks, Fabrizio, for coming to say a few words for us. All right, so good morning to you again, our invited speakers, our attendees, presenters, also again including those online. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 5th International Meeting on Zoo Research, Conservation, and Biodiversity. So I'm Azogu-Sepe, the head of the research department here at the Serengeti-Park Hodenhagen. And along with my colleagues, I am your host. So my colleagues are Ruth Marie Stecker, Philip Martins, Angelica Bowden, and our volunteer Sergio Neves. So they're in the back. If you need anything, please feel free to reach out to them. A few housekeeping rules. Presenters will be notified when their presentation is going too long. We have time cards indicating that you have 5 minutes or 2 minutes remaining in your presentation. For online presenters, you can join your particular session as speaker. And online participants should please be sure to mute their audio. So you can also add questions to the chat to increase our audience engagement and that you feel also involved even though you are virtually attending. We have allotted a time frame during the expert discussion panel where the audience can interact online, in person with the questions. Our moderator today would be John Taylor. Where are you again, John? There he is. Okay, and lastly, if anyone is interested to return their lanyards, feel free. You can also keep it as a memento from the conference. So in previous years, I've espoused about the Serengeti Park. It was opened in 1974, so we just celebrated our 50th anniversary last year. It is an animal and amusement park, approximately 200 hectares. We have various rides, shows, kiosks, and stores. All right, so we have 360 themed lodges and 2 main restaurants, of which you're in one of them, and you were in the other one yesterday. We also have up to 1,500 free-living animals on a 10-kilometer route. We have natural enclosures without barriers to observation. So this is our rhino areal. A lot of space for the rhinos to go around, and it's also a mixed species exhibit. We are home to endangered and flagship species such as the rhino, and we have increased educational opportunities to raise public awareness. On top of that, being the head of the research department, we also have unique research opportunities. All right, so this is our conference. We wanted to raise awareness towards conservation and biodiversity changes. We are enhancing zoo education and research outreach for the Serengeti-Park Hodenhagen, and we want to also continue to highlight the role of zoos and aquaria in conservation efforts and in the support of biodiversity. At the end of the day, it would be just to give people that feeling of a concrete contribution to the world, because like my husband said, it's important that we bring them closer to nature, and it starts with the kids because they will be the next generation. And lastly, we want to become the foremost event showcasing zoo research in Germany with an international reach. Our flagship species support program was created in 2021, and it was created not only to help to preserve species, but it was also to support efforts to rescue a highly endangered area where biodiversity is heavily impacted and where our support can make the most impact. However, this year, we are considering keeping it in-house, so we are wanting to support a project of ours. So the Serengeti Park project is titled Exploring Pygmy Hippo Behavior, Vocalizations, Activity, Patterns, Space Use, and Personality Dynamics in a Mixed Species Exhibit. Together with our 2 Erasmus students, Sarah and Beatrice, I don't know if they're here right now, they are not. but they are probably done with the pygmy hippo at the enclosure space. We are working on this long-term project to try to focus on identifying the key vocalizations of the pygmy hippos and the context, their space use, habitat use, as well as assessing their individual personalities. And lastly, we would want to contribute to a better understanding of these species' behaviors, and especially the fact that they are in a mixed species exhibit, which is different from other zoos that house the pygmy hippos. You advance for me then? Okay, so this year, the funds that we hope to raise during the silent auction will directly support our ongoing research. It will allow us to allocate funds in improving data collection, in investing in equipment for the analyses, and that will produce key information that will continue to help us enhance knowledge on pygmy hippos, improve animal management in the park, and perhaps spread out that it also adds to knowledge for other zoos that are housing pygmy hippos, and as well in the wild. Okay. So just a little bit of the pictures here. We have video recordings for their nightly behavior, but we can also observe them during the day when they're inside. And this is just a GIS map of their outside enclosure. And you can see where the housing is, which is this gray area next to the red marking. They're housed with monkeys as well. So, okay. So we have a cooperation with the Journal of Zoological and Botanical Gardens. One of the representatives is here, Zorana Repak. So we had a special issue last year with JZBG, and the deadline of that special issue is April 30, so just in a few weeks. If you had attended the conference last year, you are still free to apply to submit your special issue, or to our special issue, submit your manuscript. Submission and publication fee has been waived for those attendees, including those that made presentations and those that had a manuscript in preparation but only attended at that time. Okay, so as this marks our 5th year of cooperation, I think JZBG was born around the same time that IMZRCB was. So we are happy to announce an incredible sponsorship that we have with JZBG. They are offering up to 1,000 euros to fund an award, which could be the best talk, the best poster, or best online and best in-person poster. And this would be granted to the winners at this event. They also offer 10 free article publications in JZBG until the year of 2025. So everyone here can submit their papers, everyone online can submit their papers. The only requirement is that if you are a PhD submitting a paper, please have your supervisor or mentor as your co-author. So thank you to JZBG for your kind support, and we are grateful for the continued cooperation. Okay, so in 2025, our conference theme is Zoological Gardens, What's in It for Me. I've always realized that in a lot of situations where I'm encountering people and considering working together, you always have to consider what's in it for that person to want to be part of your endeavor. So zoological gardens have always been a cornerstone of human engagement with wildlife for centuries. They're offering both educational and recreational opportunities for their visitors. So we know that zoological gardens are not just a place to observe animals, but they can be really crucial towards conservation efforts, raising biodiversity issues. They are vibrant educational hubs, as well as crucial research centers. So on a societal level, zoological gardens promote community engagement. They also contribute to local economies through tourism and employment. So what I wanted to, okay, now it's working, but yeah, education and awareness. This was a picture from our last year event, and essentially you're just taking the group through a specific animal area and you're discussing about the animal, their behaviors, and sometimes you get to interact with them. Then this is our conservation effort from 1996 when we reintroduced our rhino kai to the wild in Namibia. And it's gone again. Okay, so In terms of research and science, it's what I currently do as the head of the research department, but this is also crucial towards enhancing the knowledge about the animals in our care and improving the management for them. And this I mentioned already, that we can gain social and economic impact through the touristic or the visitors that attend, that visit the parks, the visitors that come through with their kids, who are again the next generation of the animal care and management. But what is really important is our personal enrichment. So a visit to a zoo or zoological garden can be an enriching experience for people and a very transformative one. One that encourages environmental awareness. It brings you closer to nature. It improves our synergistic relationship with the animals, and it connects us with the natural world. So whether it's understanding that there's a delicate balance in the ecosystems, or engaging in meaningful conversations with everyone that you meet that are in the zoo world or outside, there's just a general curiosity of how can I contribute, what is in it for me, and how are we impacting the lives of other animals outside of ourselves. And so simply finding personal inspiration through connecting with nature, zoos offer something more than just, coming to look at the animals. So that makes it unique to each and every one of us. All right, so throughout this conference, we're going to hear from experts in the field. They're ranging from conservationists, education, or academia, and scientists, educators, and as well as the general public, essentially. So these are all over the course of this presentation, and over the course of their work today, they will explore the varied roles that zoological gardens provide and that they play in today's world. I encourage you all to ask questions, to share ideas and connect with each other throughout the conference, even through the CVent Attendee Hub app. In the app, you can find discussion boards. I don't know if any of you have explored it yet, but there are specific topics that I had included in there, and these were based on your feedback of what you would like to see talked about during the conference. So I invite you to explore and reflect on the personal, professional, and societal benefits of zoological gardens. This is your opportunity to gain insight, as well as think critically about how these institutions impact you personally, and the vital role they play in shaping our future. Okay, so our next conference is next year, March 18 to 21, 2026. So mark your calendars, save the date. It will still be a hybrid event. We would have the flagship species opportunities with the research component. And what is really important is that we continue to increase the networking, because that is how we share information. It is also really important for us as the Conference Planning Committee that we continue to evolve and reshape the conference each year. So next year is going to be something different that we will announce to you as the time comes. So if you have any ideas for speakers, workshops, etc., please feel free to reach out to us. So I want to say thank you on behalf of our Conference Planning Committee. Thank you all so much for being here. We are excited to see the conversations and collaborations that will unfold over the course of this event. We express our gratitude to organizations and scientific websites that publicized our events, such as the EAZA, BIATSA, Faudetset, the Zoo Scientist, and of course the Journal of Zoological Gardens. We also want to thank the gastronomy companies for keeping us fed and energized. So Alas Getränke, Reka, Chefs Culinar, and the last one is Fruchthof Nordheim. And of course, we want to thank our Serengeti-Park team, because they have always each year gone above and beyond to welcome everybody, provide a warm environment, and keep us moving forward. So I hope that you enjoy the conference, and we hope that you find it both engaging and inspiring. All right. So I will now introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Markus Klaus. He is the head of research and the co-director at the Clinic for Zoo Animals, Exotic Pets, and Wildlife in the University of Zurich. He's a veterinarian by education and a researcher and teacher for all of his professional life. Having trained in animal nutrition, he then expanded his portfolio to include general zoo animal husbandry, as well as evolutionary adaptations in anatomy and physiology. His keynote address today is titled Anthropomorphizing at the Zoo, Diet, Group Composition, and Population Management. In this address, he notes that although there is a historical and cultural reluctance to adopt naturalistic husbandry concepts based on biological science rather than on human tradition, the zoo community are taking steps to correct these approaches. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Markus Klaus.
Hello. Thank you for the introduction, Idu. Thank you all for coming and listening to this. Let's have a look whether this works with the talk. So the topic of my talk is called Anthropomorphizing at the Zoo. A terrible word to say it, anthropomorphizing. And it's about the way that we think about animals, the way we treat animals based on a certain concept that we have that we might fool ourselves is biological, but that in reality is historical, human-made. We are just waiting for the first slide to appear. And I would think that when, at any point in time in zoo history, there was always a debate on whether we should change husbandry, whether we should change diets, whether we should change anything towards a certain direction. And whenever that comes into play, sometimes public opinion is used as, in my view, as an excuse saying, we can't do this because the public wouldn't want that. And in that case, I usually use a series of examples from my home country, Switzerland, that there was a time when people thought other people can be property. But that was changed very early, last century, even though there were some cases of child slavery still up to the 1960s. Now, people thought that women should not participate in democratic decisions, which was changed 1 year after I was born. So if my mother would have been in hospital in Switzerland, she would have been treated by a human male doctor that could vote, whereas she wouldn't have been able to, but that has changed. Some people thought for a very long time that if you are married, that gives you a right to sexual intercourse, whereas when I was 22 years old, marital rape was made an official offense. So public opinion has changed. Some people thought for a very long time that it's okay to beat your children if you think that's necessary. And when our firstborn was 1 year old, that was made illegal in Switzerland. And some people thought that marriage is something that's for heterosexuals. And it's only a few years ago that that public opinion changed. So in all these respects, if you would have followed just public opinion, you would have been stuck there. But because of education, there was a change in public opinion. And in my view, you can achieve that for basically everything. When we're talking about anthropomorphizing animals, I would say they are typical human notions that play part of this, so I'll always use these slides. And there are two ways of anthropomorphizing. The hard one would be that you say animals should have rights, similar to human rights, and there's a movement towards that. I would say it's not a general public movement, but some people move in that direction. It's from the animal rights groups, where animals should have something like a human status, something like the rights of children to be raised in a non-violent way. Some people say animals should have the right to be free or something like that. The first typical human notion for me that I always like to talk about is freedom, and people have these ideas in their heads about how animals look like in their natural behavior. And what you typically forget when you're thinking about what it means to be free, these giraffes don't look at you because they smile, but because they're vigilant, because their lives contain stuff like lions killing their newborns or lions attacking them by themselves. The giraffes are a nice example because you can actually track non-lethal attacks on them by the scars on their bodies. So it's from this publication from 2013. And you could phrase the results that, okay, there are no 1-year-old giraffe with lion scars. Evidently, when a lion attacks a neonate giraffe, there's no scars afterwards, everything is eaten. But it would mean that if you are a 4 or 5-year-old female, every 4th one has lion scars. And that would mean like 1, 2, 3 gunshot wound scar, 1.3 knife stabbing wound scar, etc. We would not want to live in a situation like this, although a lot of people on this planet do. But it means this is not paradise. And it also means those that don't have the scar will nevertheless have been witness to one of those attacks. When we talk about freedom, we often think about an image like that, and it means my wife and me, we go for a weekend on the mountains, and while I'm there, nobody attacks my home. Nobody steals the food I bought. If I sprain my ankle, I can call a chopper and they will fly me to hospital. That is freedom. That is not the freedom of the wild. That's a highly civilized state. If you would use a picture to depict human freedom as in the wild, it would be, okay, it seems to be cut off. It would be one of these. If you want to live in the wild, you go to the Donbass, or you go to Syria or something. It's not a civilized state. That's a lawless state. And you should not forget that when we glorify freedom for wild animals, we are talking about a situation that is not civilized. It's a cruel one. But typically, at the zoos, we're not talking about hard anthropomorphizing. If you would take this to the extreme, some people do, you realize that actually animals are hurting other animals a lot. So to avoid that, you have this funny movement. You see that this is an actual website, Herbivorize Predators, a research group that wants to change the world in so that there's no trophic interactions between animals, so no animals kills another animal. We believe all species should be herbivorous. Evidently, there's bad news for this philosophy because plant sentience and plant consciousness is an emerging scientific field. So even if you're a herbivore, you're probably hurting another conscious being, so most likely this would be the way to go if you would take this to the extreme. Nonsense and bullshit. This is a real website. This is not. At the zoo, we do the soft anthropomorphizing thing, in my view. And it would be something like this. It had a Golden Globe for best documentary, one of the worst documentary pictures ever made, where animals are anthropomorphized in incredible amounts. But basically, it means that you treat animals based on emotions, some myths, some traditions that you have, anything but biological knowledge. And there are several examples for that. For example, there is this idea that we have nature out here and that we have a human-wildlife coexistence. When you look at certain pictures, you get the fact that this planet is completely dominated by humans. This is what Fabrizio said at the beginning. Looking at the rubbish we have in space around our planet, looking at how our planet would look at night. You can have pictures from above that clearly tells you human activity is shaping the planet. In 2022, there was this Nature paper that said that in 2022, there was the time when human-made materials, plastics, concrete, roads, bridges, houses, became more on the planet than growing organic matter. So whenever a politician says we need to build new houses, you are already beyond that balance. And of course, we need more houses for our people. But we should not fool ourselves that we can take that from nature because it's an even share. It's way beyond that even share. When we think about the biomass of mammals on the planet, this is humans, this is domestic animals, this is terrestrial wild mammals. This is not a coexistence. The planet is a planet of humans and animals that humans want to have. It also means we can't fool ourselves that we can release everything. Because look at the amount of domestic, just mammals. The poultry is not even in there. When you look at the split, you can take nice rhetoric turns like this corner here is cats, domestic cats. And when you then compare that to domestic cats, elephants, On this planet, if you put all the domestic cats on a scale, they weigh more than the elephants that exist on the planet. And this might be something I like to go to with my wife on a weekend. We go to the mountains to refresh. We should not fool ourselves that this is nature. This is a highly artificial state kept up by either having grazing domestic animals there or machinery. It's actually subsidized in our country so that the landscape keeps looking like that. It would be good if we could get rid of this video part down there. And this is not a space where you have a lot of wild, non-domestic species. If we would let this go wild, we would have bush encroachment, and people don't like that kind of landscape. I don't like that kind of landscape. This would be ideal for a lot of wildlife species, but we're actually subsidizing it so that it keeps looking like a garden. And when we think about the consequences this can have globally, if we are subsidizing the right side, what do you think happens when other continents do the same things? This is not moving somehow. So it would be the correspondence of sponsoring this and not the corresponding of sponsoring this. What we are subsidizing is not space for wildlife. That is one thing that you need to have in your mind as a background. Now, part of this is thinking that a lot of us think there is something like natural food. And people forget that whatever you buy at the supermarket, nothing you can buy at the supermarket is natural. Everything is highly domesticated. You can't plant an apple seed and then there will be a tree growing with a Granny Smith hanging on it, because all the apples are produced by this technique where branches of one kind of tree are put on top of the stem of another kind of tree. It's an artificial product. We know from so many studies that fruits that you have in the wild have more fiber, less sugar than domestic fruit. And everyone using domestic fruit for their animals, is making the choice of feeding something that is non-natural for the animals. Super nice example. Which grass in nature would be successful if it would shed all its seeds at one block on the same spot? It's more or less a recipe for disaster, but it's in the products we have as grains because we domesticated them for easy harvest. Another anthropomorphizing idea is that preference tells you something about adequacy. I'm using this old advertisement. If you give the big bag to the child, its welfare will increase dramatically in that instant. If you give a drug to a drug addict, their welfare will increase dramatically in that instant. That should not be the welfare we're talking about. If something, an animal or a child, wants something, pure hedonism, it should not be the benchmark for what you're doing. And I'm using other examples like primates that love fruit to hammer home that message. The historical development of feeding concepts in zoo husbandry was extremely anthropomorphized. So whatever animal group you had at the very beginning, people didn't give a shit about the natural diet. They fed what they wanted because they liked it themselves. Meat to a carnivore. They even called carnivores meat eaters. But you don't have to study to know they're eating whole prey. They're not eating meat. There's no butchery in the Serengeti. Bread or grain products for herbivores. Again, you don't have to study. You know that zebras don't go to the Serengeti bakery. Milk for adult mammals. Again, a no-brainer. No adult mammal would use milk in a natural situation. Domestic fruit for something like monkeys has nothing to do with a natural diet, but it's all stuff we like. ourselves. And that's why we like to feed them. And at the beginning of zoo animal feeding, it was just anthropomorphic diets. One of the classic consequences of this is that you get the classic deficiencies. There's no calcium in meat. There's no calcium in domestic fruit. There's no calcium in grains. So at the very beginning of zoo animal husbandry, people produced a lot of calcium deficiency. In human medicine, the lions that died at London Zoo because they were fed just meat, no bone, were called the original model of metabolic bone disease. And the same goes for primate husbandry, because primates were fed these fruit-dominated diets, or something like potatoes. Rickets was the main thing. So when people realized that, they started supplementing. And that is something that everybody loves to do. You still feed diet items that you like, and you give special powder. It's like you're the expert to know something. And people did that, and they got rid of the classic deficiencies. It's even something that you can prove. Someone did a study on historic baboon skeletons showing that the incidence of metabolic bone disease went down over the years. So having anthropomorphic diets that are supplemented was the standard for quite a while. Now, when you do that and animals don't die from immediate deficiencies, you, so to speak, have the time to realize you have civilization diseases, caries, malfermentation, obesity, not normal behavior. So now people would say the next step would be to go for mimicking the natural diets of these animals. I don't know, this thing is not reacting to me. So we want to get rid of these non-natural diet items, replace them by diet items that resemble natural diets, meaning, for example, you don't have only one hay, you have a large variety of hays and browse. You want to get rid of milk for adults completely. You want to have green leafy vegetables instead of fruit. You will not use meat, but you will use your whole carcasses. You will, in the fish, there was not so much of a change, because at the very beginning, people are used to having a whole fish on their plate. Nobody would fillet a fish and feed the fillet to the penguin. But that was exactly what they were doing when they're taking the fillet for the lions, And we want no bread at all. And I must say, I don't know what to do. And we don't want to have pelleted feeds as the basis. This is not reacting. And now it's jumped quite a bit. We don't want pelleted feeds based on starch, but we want pelleted feeds based on forages. Now, this step seems to be this super challenging. Go to a zoo and check whether they feed fruit to their primates, and that you know where they are in regards to that step. People want to keep feeding their normal things. But this is not knowledge that is new. This is knowledge that was first published for mammals in 1996. I was still a student then. And the knowledge that domestic fruit contains such an amount of sugar, maybe you trip ahead while I'm talking, I don't know, this doesn't work, has also been around for a very long time. Take, for example, this publication where people show that removing milk from gorilla diets is good, you don't have the problems. Look at the date, 1999. This is not the time to start removing milk from adult mammal diets. A century before, yes, but not like that. Other people having these reviews saying that the myocardial fibrosis, the cardiovascular problems we have in great apes derive from the fact that they're getting domestic fruit and high-starch pellets. So it's not only me telling that story. Whenever zoos do this transition, for example, one thing they observe is that aggression at feeding moments go down because now the primates don't have anything worthwhile to fight about anymore. If you just give a bunch of salads to kids, they will not fight about it. But this step seems to be so challenging. If you do that, you realize that you get rid of quite some of the problems that we had, not completely. But this would be the step where we would hope as a European Zoo Nutrition Group that most zoos should be at. Mimicking the natural diets, meaning no cultivated fruit, no bread starch, no seed mixes, no milk. You want compound feeds, pellets to be high fiber and not high starch. And you would want whole carcasses for your carnivores. And if you do that, then you have some of these problems under control. And the next step, that would be the future, or maybe now, would be adequate presentation, which is another word for enrichment. If you do that, you can get rid of most of these problems completely. The important thing is, enrichment should not be adding something attractive and make the animals work for that. Enrichment should be making the animal work for their normal diet. And that is, again, an anthropomorphizing thing. You don't have to study to know all these situations are not natural. They won't find food like that. This is because maybe you like it, maybe because in your head you have this picture of food on a plate, completely forgetting that if you do that, you have to have someone who grows the salad and plucks the salad, washes the salad, does the dressing, a third of the plate. You have someone to grow the potatoes, dig out the potatoes, wash them, peel them, cut them, fry them, another third of the plate. Someone has to breed a chicken and catch a chicken and kill the chicken and pluck the chicken and gut the chicken, cut it up and fry it. You have the next third of the plate. If you give animal food like that, you're taking away all that activity. What is your plan for replacement? What else should the animals do? Solve crossword puzzles or whatever? We humans, we have our moments of hunting and gathering once a month, once a week, maybe to get to that plate. But in reality, we humans have our professions to be able to outsource the production of this. If you give animals food like this on a plate, you're taking away their profession. And for some zoo animals, this has been shown that it works nicely. For example, giraffe, where all the food that they get is presented in a way they have to work for it. And zoos are exploring more and more ways to make access to the normal food difficult, and it should be a matter of course, not a matter of, oh, maybe we do some enrichment. There are other typical human notions going away from nutrition, and for me, the most amazing one is that messing with reproduction is completely normal. We don't even question it most of the times. Animals are adapted to solve certain situations, like rabbits can solve mating and raising their young. And that is something animals evolved to do. But we are completely okay with taking that away from them. I'm saying this as an opposition to castration complex. I would say castration is something that is so ingrained in our human nature. For dogs, we don't have a name. But if you're thinking of cats, we have a special name for the neutered cat, male cat. The same for horses, the same for cattle, the same for sheep, for rabbits and for deer. We have this for pigs, we have it for poultry. We are so used to take reproductive possibility away from animals without questioning it. We learn how to do this in veterinary science. Nobody tells us what that means for the animal, and nobody tells us what that means, what we have to do to compensate for what we are taking away. People think killing an animal is a bad thing. Nobody talks about that, in my view. So I was really surprised when I saw this paper, a good paper in terms of methods, that showed that in a group of these baboons, you had less self-directed behaviors, an indication of stress, when the whole group was put on contraceptives. So this is evidently something that we always have in our heads. When we take away reproductive activity of animals, that makes husbandry easier. It makes it easier for them to live under these conditions. To be really mean, I could say, this is a bit like saying, you know, since I amputated 3 legs of my cat, it doesn't pace anymore. The real interesting question is, if science would tell you that, that reproductive activity is bad for the individual welfare, and it's better for the individual welfare if the animals don't have to reproduce. Would you allow a species to go extinct so that all the individuals that are alive now have the best possible welfare? When we talk about domestic animals, when are piglets or cattle or poultry separated from their father? The answer is very simple. They are never separated from their father because they're never going to see the father animal. It's all done by artificial insemination, and the father animals are not there. When are they separated from their mothers? Piglets, only directly after weaning, because we haven't found a way of feeding piglets without having the sow doing it. Cattle, they're separated on the first day of life. Everyone who uses cheese products, drinks a cappuccino, fosters such a system. Poultry, again, it's the same situation like with the mothers. Poultry, all the poultry that we use will never have a parent animal around because they're brought in as eggs, brooded from the eggs. They're only together with siblings, never a parent animal. Even, and think about to how many animals we do this on a global scale. Even if you have something like dog breeders, would you ask whether the dog puppy saw its sire, whether it was socialized with a male around and the female? It might be highly variable. So when it comes to reproduction, humans then have some notions like animals don't want to be alone, they live in pairs because of some, well, it's ingrained in us. And we might start keeping a lot of animals that are typically solitary in groups or pairs. For some animals, it might work. For some animals, it might not. And even if we keep animals solitary, the question is, what does solitary mean? Because in reality, it would mean the neighbor enclosure should be something completely different. The cheetah is a nice example because there have been studies on cheetah trying to figure out why they're so difficult to reproduce, where people compare what happens if you keep them single or you keep them in pairs, showing that when you keep them single, in this case, positive auto-grooming is more present. When you keep them single, they don't pace at all. This is stereotypic pacing, but as pairs, they do. And it also affects, in case of cheetahs, their hormone levels. So the estradiol is higher when they're kept singly. And nowadays, it's clear that if you want to produce cheetahs, you can't keep them in groups. You have to do solitary husbandry. Another animal that's renowned for this would be the black rhino, where people showed that the fecal cortisol levels are much higher if you keep them permanently in pairs. And that most likely also would be the result if you compare animals kept separate versus animals kept solitarily but next to each other. And in the orangutans, people found something like that you have the Sumatran and the Bornean species, and they differ in their sociality. So the Sumatran ones are, let's say, group animals. The Bornean ones are solitary animals. So when you analyze group size versus fecal corticoid levels, there is an increase in the Bornean ones. So to speak, they don't fare well if kept in groups, whereas for the Sumatran ones, it has no effect. So if you go to a zoo and you see a single orangutan, it might be a good thing if it's a Bornean one. And in the case of the orangutans, we could even show that the prevalence of chronic respiratory diseases is much higher in the Bornean ones, which could be interpreted as an indication of chronic stress, maybe because of the wrong husbandry. And sometimes we have other ideas about reproduction, like we can separate families the way we want. This is something that's just been known for elephants not such a long time. And Edu was part of research that showed the effects of what happens when you reintroduce mothers and daughters that had been separated, which had been a normal practice in human management, that you just tear family groups apart that in nature would stay together. But the last part I want to talk about is a big area where we have several human notions. People think that some animals might be more valuable than others. Some animals are like robots, some animals are sentient beings. And I'm going to take this first chapter of this book As a case example, it's the dolphin story, where they list a lot of things now. They live in large groups where they can recognize group members. They learn behaviors from each other, something like culture. They are emphatic. So when they see a co-specific suffering, they also show signs of distress. They have something like a vocabulary for different kinds of foods. They have something like a vocabulary for different kinds of predator threats. They can pass the marshmallow test. So if they know there will be a bigger reward later, they might refrain themselves and not do that. It's also been shown that they recognize themselves in mirrors. And how would this translate in how we keep these animals? I'm not sure if you know that, but we keep these animals like that. We keep these animals in large groups or in huge cages. We kill them on an industrial scale because all of this, of course, is not about dolphins. This is about mammals everywhere or vertebrates everywhere, but in this specific case, all these examples with the research down there is about chicken. All this has been shown for chicken, and nevertheless, we treat them that way. There are, some people believe, including me, based on this New York Declaration of Animal Consciousness, there are no vertebrates that are not conscious, that are not sentient. And we still might want to use them for good reasons, but we shouldn't fool ourselves saying, we have some special animals, we take special care, and we have some we can treat them like robots. And our society is full of that discrepancy. Like, this is from a French butchery. This is all meat, but not from horses. Who cares what it's from? For me, a big thing of bigotry, we won't let our dogs roam freely, even though for the welfare of the dog, this would be super, because of the consequences. Whereas, of course, we let our cats roam freely. A lot of animal protection agencies specifically support that because nobody gives a shit about the suffering of something that's smaller than a sheep. And Mats Bertelsen put this in these words: what kind of animal food would you accept for your zoo animals? A lot of people might accept this, but your reluctance increases. But remember the Declaration of Animal Consciousness, at least from here on, we would think they're all sentient beings. And then comes this point that humans think, if you get old and you die, that's not right. We don't want that. It's a problem there. And that also means that if you inflict death, it's a problem. You don't think about the production animals because you blend that out completely. But you know that living things need to reproduce so that they can compensate for losses you have by accident or by other things. And by the way, sexual reproduction is good because it means a recombination of the genes so that your offspring can be adapted to different environments. Well, the offspring is not adapted, it's just different offsprings, and the ones that are adapted survive. But all that means is death is an important part of this, because death means the old generation makes space for the next one. Death is not bad. Death is important for the system to work. If the ones that reproduce would not die, you would have density problems, and you would not make this adaptation step. It would be horrible. Death is a gift to the next generation. Death is not something that's bad. It's maybe, I don't like it for myself, but as a general thing, it is a good part in the whole concept of nature. It's not good because it makes us think about the meaning of life. No, it's good because the next generations need the old ones to disappear. And by the way, if death is immediate, meaning there's no long pain, if death is unexpected, meaning there's no fear period, it's not a welfare problem because there's no suffering involved. Okay, so that brings me to the last part, and this is about breed and feed, breed and cull. You remember the Marius incidents where there were a lot of different reactions to the so-called surplus animal killing. And to some degree, there was public media attention. At the same time, the giraffe stud book managers said there should be a stop in reproduction. And I personally believe Marius helped people understand we should be really heeding this recommendation. Births decreased dramatically at that moment, meaning that a population pyramid in the global zoo population of giraffe from a normal growing population changed extremely fast to a population pyramid indicating an aging population, like you would see in human demography when you, no, that's one too far, when you compare countries that are still growing in their population towards the more, you would say, industrialized nations where we have a lot of old individuals and not so much young offspring being produced. So the question is, can we manage our zoo populations without killing? And not saying because killing and death is a bad thing. I'm going to summarize this in a faster way than I did at the IASA conference. So if you say you kill, you can have a short reaction time. You manage your population by just taking out individuals. If you do planned breeding, you have a lot of more things to account for. I'm not going to present them now, but it's like driving an ocean tanker in a slalom course. You have to make decisions way before the result is there. And you have to account for a lot of contingencies. If you want to kill an animal, you're pretty sure you're going to get it. If you want to breed an animal, you have to start 2 pairs breeding because one might not succeed, or 3, or you have litter sizes that you cannot predict. So it means without the killing, you always have to have spare capacity that you don't use because, hey, maybe you get 2 more males, or maybe your cheetah dam breeds 8 rather than 3 cubs. And if you're not allowed to kill what you can't use, what are you going to do? You will have a lot of non-reproductive individuals on your population. You can't select phenotypes that you want. Your personnel will be less experienced. And your parent animal will be less experienced if you don't allow them to breed regularly. In this scenario, you can use the old animals as sentinels for diseases. It also means you have more than one population, that you're leaving space unused that you could use for another species with similar husbandry requirements. In terms of welfare, if you do the breed and cull, you can have the species-specific reproduction. The animals have something to do that gives meaning to their life, something they evolved for. If you opt for the other way, you not only have the problems you might have with non-reproduction, but the question is, how are you compensating for the loss of meaning in the life? And when you're thinking about the welfare of other animals, this is where the argument becomes, for me, completely compelling, even if people don't think about population management, because population is an abstract thing, and at my zoo I only have these 3 chimps or something. But when you're thinking of other animals, how would you want that food animals live? I think if food animals should have a good welfare, they should have species-specific reproduction, good social structures for their species, large enclosures with structure, proper food, good enrichment. It would be nice if the death could happen at a biologically plausible age, in familiar surroundings. All this is a nice way to produce food animals. And this means animals at your zoo would be ideal for that, because they have all that. If you don't like that, you take away not only this here and increase problems with reproduction, but you're automatically also fostering the system where you are sourcing your food from animals that most likely live under worse condition at your zoo. We've talked about the social structures. They have smaller enclosures. They have food that's not appropriate for a long-term survival. They have less enrichment, and they will die after transport to a slaughterhouse in unfamiliar surroundings. And now you tell me you don't use this for welfare. Makes no sense to me at all. So you have the population sustainability and the welfare, and you will take all the disadvantages just because you don't want to kill in a society where animal killing is ubiquitous anyhow. So these good reasons are not good enough. I find this anthropomorphizing. So I think breed and feed is reasonable and it's communicable for that cause. And education typically means not you tell people what they know. That might be more like entertainment. You tell people something they don't know. You try to influence their opinion. And how can you talk about conservation, about biology, when you blend out death and killing? And how do you influence the opinion of people that are also important when it comes to species conservation in other habitats? If they're not used to the idea of killing, you remember what the Botswanan minister said, that, okay, Germany doesn't want trophy hunting, then Germany should just take 20,000 elephants from Botswana and have them live in their country. If we foster the idea that you can't kill animals for good reasons, this is one result. So this is where I'm stopping now. There were public opinions that have changed over time, and all of these that I'm listing here, I think is super important that the change happened, and I'm very glad it happened. I can say that the way we brought up our kids, and those of you who have kids that were born before this date, I'm sure, we didn't make use of the possibility that it was still legal to beat them. So I would think some things I want to be done with. Beating children. Imagine there's a school parent evening and you come there to talk about what the teacher is going to teach, and then one parent goes, I want to make a general discussion. You know, I was beaten as a kid and didn't hurt me. Maybe we should think about corporal punishment again. And you think, no, I'm not going to have that discussion anymore. That's done. When I go to a zoo and they feed fruit to their animals, I don't want that discussion anymore. That should be done. It's so much scientific evidence, and it's been such a long time. So for me, that is a thing, how the zoo community works. Other things that we want to get rid of, or in my view, is animals should not have diets that they like and that humans like. Animals should get diets that mimic their natural behavior and that they're good for their long-term health. Animals should not be fed in lumps or in bowls, but animals should work for their usual food all the time as a so-called enrichment. It should not be without thought that we mess with the reproduction of animals, but we should influence the reproduction with very detailed thought about the biology, about the consequences on physiology and psychology of the animals. And I think it is time that we don't think killing is a bad thing, but there might be very good reasons to do this in a respectful way to ensure the survival of zoo populations and enhance animal welfare. And it is for this last reason that this year we published this paper that came out in January. Those of you who haven't seen it, I hope you will check it out. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for this cool and interesting presentation. I really enjoyed it. And we have time for maybe two questions. And then we got a break anyway. So if you want to, we can have a shorter break if you have a lot of questions. So here's one.
Hi, thanks for that. That was really interesting. So I'm not in the zoo world. I'm a research scientist. So maybe this is not a great question, but I'm kind of interested. If you have these ideas, okay, we can publish papers, but it's not the research scientists that you really need to convince, right? It's the general public. So how do you go about doing that, bearing in mind, like even for yourself, you said, I look at these two mountainsides, I want to see the overmanaged. That's what I find more beautiful. We all have these kind of biases. I would like to see the other side. That's what I would find more beautiful. So I just wonder how you think this message can be properly communicated to the public in a way that makes this kind of treatment acceptable.
So it depends about what you were talking about. So if you're talking about the breed and feed or the breed and cull regime, I'm teaching this to public whenever I can, whenever I get the opportunity. I've never met an audience yet where I've got a lot of resistance. My typical experience is people are surprised, and my interpretation is about themselves, about not thinking about how production animals are treated and why killing zoo animals and using them is good for population safety and for the welfare. it's all aspects that they didn't think about. I don't get inimical reactions with that. And I've done this, I think, with lay people now, or with general audiences a lot now. So after this publication of this came out this in January, we specifically made, this is not a scientific paper, this is an opinion paper, you know? It's like our opinion, like an essay. And we specifically did that to get into the public discourse. And this is a public discourse that is happening in the zoo community at the moment, but also in the interaction with the public. I would say in some Scandinavian countries, in Switzerland, in Germany, this is something that is not very dramatic. I mean, so many German zoos feed their animals to their animals, and there's no media reaction. We actually did a survey once, 2 years ago, on the media reactions, and most of the time there isn't. What were you? A tiger was again fed a deer. Yeah, so what? But influencing the general idea, you have this problem that in some European countries it's illegal to kill for population management reasons. And that is one thing that you want to do. I draw the comparison, which is anthropomorphizing, I know, with beating children or with other examples, where also people influence public opinion to the fact that a law was changed or a law was made. And I think this is what, because I feel that the welfare in zoos and the population safety in zoos is an important thing, that tool should be allowed and not prohibited. Super long answer.
Okay, one more short question, and then we can just continue discussing in our 5-minute tea break, maybe.
Thanks, Markus, for this great presentation. So I fully support that we should feed the zoo predators with the entire carcass. But what's your opinion and your experience with the reaction of people? We should also let them hunt their prey. This is also part of their repertoire of natural behavior.
So if you say we should let them hunt, I fully support that. Not live prey. Civilization is for everything. My right to swing my fist stops where your nose starts. To say, this is, for me, it's like having cats kill whatever they want. That's a bad thing. Welfare is for all creatures. It's a civilized state. We are not mimicking nature. We are giving these animals fearless and meaningful lives. So for predators, it is a challenge. You should not, in Switzerland, for example, it's prohibited to put food on the floor for a lion. In the Swiss animal protection law, it says the lion has to work for the food. It's for the large felids that they have this in the... They don't have it for the large canids. I don't know why, but at least for the felids it's in there. You have to find ways how to do that. And if you want to keep a predator, then it's your creativity that is wanted here. How you can feed carcasses in a way that they also have to do something for them, maybe have something like a hunting experience, especially if they can fail, so that they really have to pay attention and use their brain. If you have 100% success, it's not success, it's normal. By not letting them fail, you take away from these animals achievement. An anthropomorphizing idea, but nevertheless. So I would not feed live animals. I think this is a crime against the prey animals.